So it's not exactly a secret that Halo hasn't been in the best state over the last several years, to say the least. The Halo franchise as a whole has seen disastrous levels of decline since at least 2012 with the release of Halo 4, and some might even argue said decline started a few years before that. But whatever you believe, it's undeniable that the once titanic franchise we knew and loved known as Halo has become a shadow of its former self. Now I could point out the many reasons for exactly why that is, especially with the quote-unquote newer games and the overabundance of trend-chasing gimmicks as well as the general complete lack of meaningful iterations within those titles, but I've already made several videos on that topic. What I wanted to cover today is the fact that classic Halo, that is to say Halos 1, 2, 3, ODST, and of course Reach, are indisputably in the worst state they've ever been in terms of playability. Now I'm not talking about player count so much, as diminished numbers are to be expected with games that are all well over a decade old, or in the case with Halos 1 and 2, over 2 decades old. No. What I'm talking about today is the fact that Halo Studios, also known as 343 Industries and a $1 paper mask, released the Master Chief Collection over 10 years ago, and it's still broken to this day. And 343 has had every opportunity to fix it, but for some reason hasn't. The Master Chief Collection, or MCC as I'll be referring to it for the rest of this video, was supposed to be the re-release to rival all re-releases, the definitive way to experience classic Halo. 343, prior to its launch, touted it as the ultimate compilation, a newly remastered Halo 2 dubbed Halo 2 Anniversary, with improved graphics and features, along with all of the mainline Halo games in one package with multiplayer for just $60, now infamously quoted to be shipped exactly as it was 10 years ago. But there was a problem. A big one. What was promised and what was delivered were two completely different things. See, 343 started the bar off high with promises so grand they seemed unrealistic. Whether this was 343's decision directly or more related to Microsoft's marketing team is still unclear, but the fact is that the game launched in such a bad state, with the bar so low it might as well have been underground. MCC's release was called by many the worst game launch to date back in 2014, as it was rife with crashes, 2+ hour long matchmaking times, visual bugs, a barely functional UI, broken achievements, and many missing features, as well as other game-breaking bugs. I feel the need to point out, for all the forgetful or young people in the audience, this was 2014, a time before broken launches were accepted as the status quo. MCC was not the rule, rather it was the exception, and in some ways I suppose a trendsetter in the worst possible way for all the broken launches across the industry to come. So MCC didn't work out day one. Months passed. Minor improvements came with patches. ODST got ported over without Firefight, one of the major selling points for the original game for some reason. In fact, it would take several years for 343 to implement the mode. This is a common theme across all of 343's titles, things that are blatantly unfinished being passed off as a complete product. For example, on launch and for many years to come, yes, I said years, MCC had no progression system. Armor customization in Halos 3 and 4 was more limited than it was on the 360 versions of the same games, with players only able to customize the base armor and helmet slots, whereas on 360 you could customize the chest, legs, forearms, each individual shoulder, and helmets uniquely to your liking. All of this was scaled back from the game's original releases. To add to this, Halo 2 never got the full remaster treatment. The anniversary component of Halo 2's multiplayer was limited to a small handful of maps, oddly running on a modified version of Halo 4's engine for some reason. So, something completely separate from the rest of H2A. To this day, in 2025, over 10 years after MCC's release, we have not gotten any more maps, meaning H2A's multiplayer was never finished. To add insult to injury, these maps have serious lighting issues making them almost impossible to play. Even worse still, the entirety of MCC's multiplayer lacked the ability for players to choose which Halo game they wanted to play in 8v8 game modes. The matchmaking system would randomly assign players to a lobby, where a voting system would then allow the players to pick one of 3 options. More often than not, the options presented seemed to heavily favor Halos 3 and 4, meaning that if you wanted to play 1, 2, or Halo 2 Anniversary, you were just out of luck, unless you had enough people to play custom games, and even then, customs were extremely broken to the point that they were borderline non-functional due to constant connection issues, crashing, and then maps taking exceedingly long times to load. That's not even the full extent of all the missing and incomplete features, but more on that in a bit. In March of 2019, 343 would announce that finally, after a long time of alleged leaks and speculation, MCC would in fact be coming to PC later that year, as well as Reach being added to the collection. The community was largely overjoyed, but skeptical, as MCC on console had yet to be fully fixed. Custom games especially were still broken, with connectivity and crashing issues being among the most prominent. Many other issues from launch still persisted, like visual bugs, the original graphics on both Halos 1 and 2 looking significantly worse than their original Xbox counterparts, as well as hit detection and others being still blatantly broken at this point, being about 4 years after release. Still though, there was significant hype around Halo finally making a return to PC, as the last mainline Halo game to get a PC release was Halo 2 in May of 2007. There were once again problems though. MCC on PC was not going to come out all at once. 343 decided instead to release it starting with Halo Reach, with all the other games being considered DLC to come at a later date. While Reach functioned decently enough, Forge mode was for some reason delayed by several months, with modders being able to access the level editing mode well before 343 would release it to the public. But we're going to talk more about mods in a little bit as well. So, Reach without Forge was released, then a short time later, Halo Combat Evolved would make its debut on PC for the second time. Only CE's launch was not nearly as smooth as Reach's. Combat Evolved would launch with many bugs related to crashing, hit detection, and audio that would persist for months, if not years in some cases. To date, playing a custom game with flamethrowers on the map will cause the game to crash to desktop on PC. This is one of the many easily reproducible glitches that 343 has yet to correct. In time, Halos 3 and 4 would come out, as well as ODST, much the same with similar issues and bugs that would take years to fix and in many cases once again still persist to this day. It was around this time when Halo Infinite was originally set to release in late 2020. It did not release due to significant delays many attribute to ongoing global events at the time. However, I would like to raise the point here that Halo Infinite had been in development since at least early 2016, so the events of 2020 should not have had nearly as much of an impact as they did on the game's development. With this, I would also like to point out that once Halo 5 was released in late 2015, almost all support was basically dropped for MCC. No new content was added, bugs were left unfixed, and the game's population suffered drastically as a result. It would seem almost as if 343 quote-unquote revived MCC with a PC release and the promise of additional content solely as a way to promote their upcoming game, Halo Infinite. At the very least, the timing was sure convenient. But the true intentions were darker still, as in 2022, 343 revealed their intentions to add microtransactions to MCC. While it is worth noting that these proposed microtransactions, which would have included purchasable in-game currency to bypass the game's grindy progression system, were never actually implemented after massive backlash, the very fact 343 even considered them in the first place is kind of insane. MCC was 8 years old at that point, and I need to point out that it was actually Pierre Hintze, the current head of Halo Studios, who is in charge of MCC's development at this point in time. I also want to bring to attention this weird fallacy many in the Halo community seem to have, that Pierre Hintze somehow fixed or saved MCC when that is objectively completely untrue. While MCC has certainly come a long way from what it was back in 2014, it is by no means fixed. Crashes still happen regularly, especially during custom games on Halo 3. I host casual game nights from time to time on the channel Discord, link down below if you want to join, but during those game nights, it's not uncommon for multiple people to crash within the first half hour to hour of playing Halo 3. These crashes are almost always related to Unreal Engine, which, might I mention, is the very tool that 343 wants to use for their next game. Halo 2 Customs is also massively broken. Oftentimes during team-based games, players just won't be put on teams at all, making the match literally unplayable, as every kill will count as a betrayal and scores can't be kept due to the lack of teams in a team game. Hit detection on both Halo 1, 2, and 3, while an improvement from the original 2014 release, is still massively inconsistent both in the campaign and the multiplayer. Joining and staying in-game seems to have only gotten worse with recent updates when using the Customs browser, with players often randomly being kicked and returned to the menu. Sometimes the entire lobby will close, just sending everybody back to the menu. Just a few days ago, myself and a friend were trying to play some Customs, and this happened. then there's the aforementioned lighting issues on H2A maps, especially the Forge maps, which are kind of crucial given the fact that H2A never got more than a few maps in the first place, and these are all still present in the game today as of March 2025, and I'm sure they'll be there for years to come. None of this has been fixed. This is all an obvious problem, not only because of the fact that MCC itself is broken, but classic Halo in general from a game preservation standpoint alone is struggling. The servers for all of the classic games on 360 have been shut down, meaning that the most viable way to play those games online in any form is via the Master Chief Collection. The Master Chief Collection that doesn't work. Then there's the skill-based matchmaking, which is an absolute disaster. There seems to be some sort of hidden SBMM in the multiplayer for MCC, which intentionally pairs very skilled players with very unskilled players in an effort to try and balance matches out. The only problem is it doesn't actually do that. What it instead does is make every match a sweatfest where one team will usually end up overwhelmingly dominating the other. Now this has always been a thing with Halo, but never to this extent. I remember back in the days of Halo Reach, you used to be able to go onto Halo 3 and just play casually, but that physically isn't possible anymore, as if you try to do that on MCC, you'll run into loads of MLG wannabes or sometimes literal hackers. On top of that, every game I get into in 8v8 has at least 2 to 3 players per team that aren't playing the game. And then there's the quitting epidemic I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, where 8v8 games often become 5v7 or 3v5. I've seen quite a few 7v2s. I can't entirely blame the quitters though, because who wants to play a game where you just get spawn killed by some unemployed 20-year-old who hasn't left the basement in 3 weeks? I feel like that's a wider problem in gaming as a whole, but that's another topic for another video. So, on top of all those problems, you still have a massive amount of random disconnects in both custom games and regular matchmaking. And the weird thing is, MCC will actually ban you for its own glitches, so if the game bugs out too many times and just kicks you out when you're trying to join, guess what? You're banned for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it is, and you just can't play. Now, I understand that not everyone has the same issues as me. I also understand that I'm not the only one with these problems either. The fact is, when making a game for PC, developers are supposed to account for many different types of hardware, from motherboards to video cards and CPUs, and it seems like for one reason or another, 343 just hasn't done that. I've played with some people that have little to no issues at all, where many others can barely get the game to run, even when their system is well above the minimum recommended requirements to play the game. Don't even get me started on the hassle of getting the game to run on Steam Deck, which it's supposedly playable on, but results vary nonetheless. So, let's recap. 343 releases MCC in a massively broken and incomplete state. Then Halo 5 comes out, and then 343 seemingly abandons MCC with no major updates or fixes for years. Then suddenly out of nowhere they put it on PC to hype up Halo Infinite. When that fails miserably, they try to monetize it, which also fails. When they realize they can't milk a 10-year-old broken game, they just leave it to the wolves. But it doesn't end there. Let's talk about more missing features and what 343 calls mod support. So the original Halo games had awesome loading screens. They looked like this. And this. They were true works of art, and now MCC has still images? Why? Why is this even a thing? Games in 2001 and earlier were able to have proper animated loading screens, and MCC just gets these soulless still images. It's not even like 343 had to make their own animations. They didn't have to develop things. Animations existed, they just didn't put them in. I mean, the Master Chief Collection, the compilation of all the Halo games, doesn't even get the cool animations from the original games? And the same goes for the entire UI. MCC's UI, both on launch and today, resemble nothing of the original games. They're these incredibly clunky and unintuitive mashes of buttons and folders, unlike the originals, which had a crisp and clean, straightforward and to-the-point setup. Not to mention, MCC's UI isn't even responsive. Oftentimes I have to press the same button 2 or 3 times to get it to work. It isn't lag or some kind of input delay on my system's end, the input just doesn't work sometimes. A sound will play when I press the button, but nothing happens. How has a game been out for 10 years, and it doesn't even have a working menu. Then there's the Customs browser, something that was only added years after the game's launch, when the original PC port of Combat Evolved had it day one. With that Customs browser, there is no support for mods whatsoever, which means that any modded multiplayer maps you may have, well, you better be sure you have a dozen or so friends to play with them, otherwise they start to feel real empty. Crossplay is yet another feature that has not been fully implemented, with campaign crossplay only being available on Halo 3 for some reason. Now, I mentioned mods before, so let's talk about those. Thus far, the mod tools for Halo are a bit limited. No source code has been released despite the games being 15 plus years old now. Also, there is zero, and I mean zero, mod support for Xbox. If Bethesda can add mods to consoles, why can't 343? There's certainly a demand for it, but I guess it's because 343 can't monetize it, so they have no interest in it. Then there's the fact that 343 keeps releasing these nothing burger updates that for some reason prevents most mods from working. This happens every few months and breaks the majority of mods, and yet 343 does nothing to correct it. To my understanding, for the most part, it's a relatively simple fix, yet 343 just refuses to do anything about the problem. It's weird because of all the Steam games I've played, Halo by far has the worst workshop support when it comes to updates breaking mods. There's also no way to roll back versions of the game either. It's almost as if 343 doesn't want us to be able to play mods, because maybe it would just affect their player base in Halo Infinite? I don't know. Speaking of user-generated content, let's talk about the Forge mode. For some reason, 343 has placed a hard limit on how many Forge maps you can save on your own system. It doesn't tell you that until you've tried to save one that you've been working on. So if you've just spent 4 hours building your latest giant invasion map, you're SOL. Thanks, 343. 343 has been absolutely disastrous for Halo. That's not up for debate at this point. But why is it that it seems like 343 is intentionally trashing the classic game's reputation and experience at this point? It's like they want to rewrite not only what Halo is, but also what it was. Just take a look at some of the cosmetics they added to Halo's Reach in 3 a couple of years ago. Do these fit into Halo at all? What even is this? I know someone's going to leave a comment below saying, "Oh, but broken, Bungie added Hayabusa and Haunted. Get wrecked, Bungie shill!" Hayabusa and Haunted were one single armor that didn't fit with the rest of the game, but they were in a sea of other cosmetics that did. They were a unique rarity that only showed up from time to time. Only the most skilled players could unlock it. 343's, I'll call them Skyrim armors, are extremely prevalent and don't fit in at all. At least Hayabusa and Haunted were somewhat believable. After all, it's not the first time we've seen skeleton helmets in sci-fi depicted at least semi-seriously. 343's added cosmetics, on the other hand, directly contrast with the established classic Halo aesthetic, and they were only added right before Halo Infinite came out. It's as if they wanted to condition players to being used to seeing those kinds of wacky cosmetics in-game. After all, we've seen what comes out of Halo Infinite with no signs of stopping. While 343 does allow the option in MCC to turn new cosmetics off, if you do that, you miss out on the so-called new stuff that is original Bungie-era design, due to it largely being made up of cut content like the GRD helmet in Halo Reach. There's this whole rewriting of Halo's aesthetic that's been happening ever since 343 took over, and this sort of gaslighting thing where 343 and their supporters claim it's not happening, when modern Halo is starting to look like every other generic live service slop rather than the military sci-fi we knew and loved of yesteryear. Yet it seems like 343 wants us to forget what Halo was, forget its greatness and what it once stood for. Perhaps what is most insulting is the fact that 343 has no reservations around capitalizing on nostalgia without actually bringing back in any significant or meaningful way what made Halo great in the first place. They even made a big show of the first Halo Infinite Battle Pass being centered around Reach. In fact, Halo Infinite's entire marketing campaign was centered around the idea of returning to Halo's roots in the form of a spiritual reboot. That's not me saying it. That comes directly from the mouth of Chris Lee, a director at 343 who was not only working on Halo Infinite until late 2020, but who was also the executive producer on Halo 5 and a senior lead on Halo 4. Despite 343's nostalgic marketing ploys and claims that they have always aimed to respect Halo's legacy, their actual intentions differ dramatically. We can see this not only in the ways they make and manage their games, but 343 employees have straight up come out and told us themselves. Look at this guy, for example, who decided to get a job at a company that makes military sci-fi games about shooting things, even though he doesn't like guns. Or what about this intelligent individual who mocks classic fans for disliking art style changes? In a recent video released by 343, Pierre Hinsa, the head of the studio, openly admits that Halo Infinite was, and I quote, "the last remnants of how we made Halo games in the past. That was our recipe, and now we are changing the recipe," end quote. Take special note of how he specifically says the last remnants. Last, implying that 343 has been working towards changing how Halo was made for a while. Like they view classic Halo as some kind of scourge, some kind of infestation that needs to be forced out. Us classic Halo fans are a burden to them. This has been a well-known fact since Halo 4, when they infamously not only admitted to, but bragged about hiring people who hated Halo to make Halo. They even described having to work on Halo as burdensome. This mentality has never changed, and we can see this with the Halo TV show, where the showrunners admitted, under 343's direction, that they intentionally didn't look at the games for inspiration regarding anything. They wanted to make something completely new, they wanted to completely change Halo, and make it in their image, rather than respecting what they inherited. Then most recently, you have this individual who was just hired by 343 and was the former marketing director for a failed game called Concord. She says her first order of business is to put more cat helmets into the game. Look, I've got nothing against cats, I love my cat, but he doesn't need to be in a military sci-fi. The fact of the matter is, 343 has repeatedly displayed that they have nothing but contempt for the classic games and their fans unless they can make money off of them. They have no respect nor any desire to make anything reminiscent of the Halo we knew and loved beyond surface-level cosmetics and marketing, and even then, they are further moving away from that. MCC is an absolute Charlie Foxtrot, and 343 has shown no interest in further work on it. To retort those who would claim 343 has no duty or incentive to fix MCC due to the lack of monetization, I say the following. For one, on a basic functionality level, it doesn't work. The game should not crash because I wanted to play Halo 3. That alone is a reason it still needs work. They have left a job unfinished. In any other industry, you can't not meet your deadlines, not finish work, and then demand a raise or more pay. That's not how it works. Unless you're talking about the government, but that's besides the point. MCC, and thus by extension, classic Halo isn't just broken at this point, it's actively being sabotaged. All because 343 can't allow it to succeed, because if it did, if MCC actually worked, had proper crossplay, mod support for consoles and PC, as well as a decent matchmaking system with functional games, Halo Infinite, or any other slop they make, wouldn't be able to hold a candle to it. And according to the Steam charts, at least on PC, Infinite still can't compete with MCC, despite the absurdly bad state it's currently in. At this point, considering that MCC has been out for well over 10 years now, the fact that the game launched as broken as it did, took so long to fix, and then was just abandoned for a few years, combined with the fact that modern MCC is still a dumpster fire, really tells me that 343 has no intention for this game to succeed in any shape or form. They are 100% intentionally sabotaging it. Like 343 themselves said, they view us as a burden. They view the classic fans, anyone who likes the classic games, as a burden. And they just don't want to work on Halo. They want to work on Virtual Store Microtransaction Simulator 5, which is what they've got over in Halo Infinite. They want to work on Loot Box Cash Grab 5, that's Halo 5. They don't want to work on Halo. They have no desire in decent writing, they have no desire in decent gameplay or implementing fan favorite or fan requested features. They just want to implement things that will look good in marketing and that will get people to buy. And it's really a shame because Halo, I would say Halo is dead, but at this point I would argue that it's worse than dead. Halo died years ago, and 343 at this point is parading around its corpse and trying to convince everyone, hey, look, it's still alive, look, remember the iconic look of it? Look, Halo Reach Battle Pass, guys, check it out. oh look, we added in some random cosmetic that should have been there at launch 3 years too late, or some random game mode like Assault or Firefight or whatever else. Quick, come back to our game, spend money on $20 microtransactions. I mean, it's ridiculous. Halo is I would be ashamed to work at 343 if I worked there. I would not be okay with doing the sleazy crap that they do. And, you know, I just don't even know what to say anymore. At this point, I am thoroughly pissed off with the state of this franchise, and I've said this many times before, I will not be buying the next Halo game. I don't care what kind of marketing they say, I don't care if it's Halo 3 Anniversary, I'm not buying it, because 343 just repeatedly shows that they hate us. They don't want anything to do with us, at least not the classic fans. Anyone who doesn't consume, just sit there and mindlessly consume the slop that they put out, they don't want us. And they've made that quite clear, so I'm out, and hopefully, you know, get some guys together and play some custom games. Channel Discord link below. Probably not going to be able to play Halo 3 because it just crashes too much. Probably play some Halo Reach. I have quite a few cool levels for there. So yeah, check that out if you're interested. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, or share any of the same sentiments I've said here. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you've made it to the end. This is a long video. I did not intend this video to be so long, but thanks for watching if you ended up getting here. And yeah, subscribe for more Halo gaming content. I'm kind of shifting to do more random gaming content, but I'll still do Halo from time to time. Again, thank you for watching if I haven't already said that, and have a great day and stay safe. Goodbye.